Hello, everyone. Considering that we are going back down into a month of lockdown and no class, I thought it might be useful for me to have some videos that you guys have asked for in the past. Today we're going to do a little bit of one-handed work. Specifically, I want to talk to you all about the moulinet drill I had you guys doing in one of our classes, and some basic sort of wrist mobility warm-ups and exercises that we can do. Now, I'm doing this with a Saber, but you can do this just as easily with a stick if you have a single stick, or in this case a 3/4 inch pine dowel with a little bit of tape to hold on. This is just as effective as training with the Saber for mobility exercises. So the first ones that I've shown you guys in the past are quite simple. You want to get your arm out at length, shoulder height roughly straight out, and then just want to let your sword drop to the bottom. Come around and go this way as well. You want to have a loose grip, not a hard grip. This is done easier just by rotating around that elbow into the shoulder. If you let go, you're not getting that much rotation. Just allow it to go, but don't hold on too tight that you hurt your wrist. Just back and forth, nice and easy. And I would say start with 5 to 10 of these, and then switch to the other side. This should all be done ambidextrously, in part just to give you a break between exercises, in part because it's just good to train both, and finally also because the books tell you to train ambidextrously, and it's best to listen. And training one-handed on both sides will allow this training to also go back to two-handed weapons, and you will need both hands to be good for that as well. The other thing is to, with the arm extended still, bring the tip back as far as you can with the wrist, and then let it come forward. At first you can do this just gently, as much as you want. I'd say start off with 5 to 10 before switching over to the other side, and then doing maybe 3 sets of 5. But as you get more comfortable with this, you can start doing it with added power from the wrist. This will obviously be harder on the wrist, but it's a good exercise. And obviously, same idea on this side. I'm changing the feet just for comfort. And this also builds into what I want to talk about next, but this is mostly about isolating the parts of the arm that you need for the cut. So you'll see we just did that with the wrist. You can do this if you're in a good stance by leaning forward. If you took my Crispin class, this is just a lean, in that we let the front knee move forward and the back knee straighten out. We're not stepping, but you can with the lean essentially turn that into more of an attack. The other thing we can add after we do this just at the wrist is to bring in the elbow. So we start here, we bring back, and we let go through all the way. Elbow, wrist, out. Okay, if we want, we can build the whole arm into this, because this is a training exercise. I don't suggest cutting like this, and I don't suggest fighting like this, but it is fine as an exercise. So there's the difference between a 90-degree arm parallel to the shoulder and bringing it up. All right, so we have three connected motions here. We bring down to the 90, we extend the arm, we extend the wrist. 3 motions that we then bring together versus 1 motion, 2 motion, 3 motion, and then in any of those steps, we can add the footwork in, well, the leading in as well. That leads me into the next bit, which would be then moulinets. Or rather cutting in general, working our way through to moulinets from Crispin's wrist cutting. So if we assume from here, from this hanging guard position, that we are cutting Christman style, which is just with the wrist and that rotation, you'll see if we do this correctly that it's just the tip moving forward, that we are not rotating the tip, but rather rotating best we can just at the wrist. And if we do this at extension, we can still gain plenty of power from that cut just by rotating the wrist rather than by doing any sort of moulinet. And I suggest only doing that for any cuts you have that come from this side or from above repeatedly with that wrist cut, but I wouldn't do more than 5 of each, if that, when you get started, and just do it slowly so you can get the mechanic down. But like with the cut where we can do just wrist, we can now build up. So first we had just the wrist rotating, and now we can use the wrist for a small moulinet. From here, for that same cut, just with the wrist, we can do little circular moulinets, or we can do bigger moulinets. All the way down to bringing the tip almost parallel to the body and rotating it forward. Mind you, this is all still done at various sizes from just the wrist. This is pure wrist work, and this is great training to build up wrist strength and wrist flexibility and mobility like we did with the previous exercises that a lot of us struggle with when we're first starting off with one-handed weapons. So 3 moulinets with the wrist, the small one, a medium one, so small is still mostly forward pointed, the medium which would be side pointed, and this is the type of moulinet you would see in something like the 19th century Berliner Turnschule manual that Jeremy Stefflik translated, all the way through to all the way back. Put the tip behind as if you had just defended and bring it all the way around. And I think that is closer to some more of the Italian styles where this comes as a defensive action into an offensive action. So you can train those 3 moulinets, little forward, more to the middle, all the way to the back, either with that prime cut or with any of the other cuts along the way. They all work in this respect. You can then build into the elbow. So now your moulinet comes from the elbow, not from the wrist, but all the way from the elbow. So now we look as if we're going to look at a wristwatch in this particular instance. We come from here, we come all the way back so that our arm is flat and parallel with the plane of the body and perpendicular to the plane of the cut, and from here roll it through. And now we're adding that element from the elbow. That is still relatively common in a lot of styles, that moulinet is taken from the elbow. It gives a lot more power, it gives a lot more speed. Some people find it has more control, and it allows some versatility in terms of how close your sword is to the body and what you're reacting to. So the very small wrist moulinets are fine for attacking forward immediately. They're not so good for using a moulinet in a defensive action from a cut on this side. There the elbow is required. You can kind of do that with the wrist, but the elbow helps make that a defensive action to the side and on your inside line further in. So also a useful tool. Bring it in, bring it out. This still requires the rotating wrist action. It just puts it at the end of the chain from the initial lever point of the elbow. So we can train that in all our cuts as well. We can also add the shoulder. Now again, I find this a useful training exercise for shoulder range of motion, for shoulder strength, for building up all the support muscles and everything that are around the shoulder, especially if done in a controlled fashion with a lot of thought towards your own personal physical safety and ability. I find this very useful. But I find it almost always excessive if you were to use this for an actual cut and trying to actually do damage, because there's absolutely no need to build all that power in. Concept remains the same. come from our hanger, we roll all the way through to put our head underneath the arm, and then come out with that same 3-point connected chain that I mentioned earlier. So from here, it's this action. There's a ton of power in that. I find it unnecessary. So if we have that moulinet, we can now do that, or that attack, we can now do that either just from wrist rotation, from wrist moulinet, from elbow moulinet, or from a shoulder moulinet. Right? That gives us from the hanger for the cut, from the prime cut just here, or it gives us the short moulinet, the medium moulinet, or the big moulinet with the wrist. Sorry, do that again, there. Then the moulinet with the elbow, or the moulinet with the whole arm. And if you train all three of those, and then work your way around the cuts with them, then that is a good basis for any beginning practice to build power across all the joints that you're going to need, and grip strength that you'll need for any one-handed work you do, be that rapier, be that saber, be that side sword, be it single stick, be it dagger.